Our industry today is leaving 700 billion, I'm going to say that again, that's with a B, $700 billion of revenue. We're leaving that on the table by not working with women the same way that we work with men in our industry. So it's little things that will help take that money off the table and put it in your pocket if you do all these little things correctly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to CBS Spotlight. If you are here by mistake, you are in the right place now. I'm Eric Alvarado, along with my co-host, Mr. Ted Hikes, and we are friendly guys through the world of insurance and wealth management. And today on our show, we've got a really special guest. She is the SVP, Head of Global Atlantic Consulting, their practice management specialist, Miss Jeannie Underwood Cottner. Jeannie, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
We appreciate you jumping on, and we'll get right into it. So,
Jeannie, thanks again for being here today. I'd love the audience to kind of get a little background on you, get to know you a little bit. So would you mind sharing your career journey and what led you to your current role here at Global Atlantic?
Yeah, no, thanks. I would love to answer that. So I started in the industry. I majored in finance. And in my first job out of college was with Edward Jones, actually at their home office in annuity marketing, and made my way through there for a couple years. And then I was introduced to wholesaling. And I remember a wholesaler came and visited the campus I was on. I was like, wow, this is like a really fun job. And so there was an opening at a company called Van Campen Investments, which is no longer in existence. It was gobbled up after 2008 by a company called Invesco. And so I started my wholesaling career with Van Campen that led me to Invesco through that acquisition. And through that journey of wholesaling, what I noticed is how you could really differentiate yourself is if you were a really good speaker. And we had this speakers bureau at Van Campen called Van Campen Consulting. And that's all they did was they represented the company, they traveled the company and spoke. And then we had the opportunity to really borrow their programs and use them in the field. And so I started using all their programs, and that was getting me on agendas everywhere in my territory. And then it led to national speaking opportunities. And then Global Atlantic was looking to start kind of a speakers bureau, a practice management division. And I knew a number of people at Global Atlantic, and they called and said, hey, you want to take a chance over here? And I had been with Van Campen / Invesco for 18 years. And I was like, why not? Let's see what happens. And here I am today, and I've never looked back.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Jeannie, we hear that you have a unique daily tradition over at Global that really helps you, when you're interacting with advisors on a day-to-day basis. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always say this, we wake up every day thinking about the financial professional community, and we scan the landscape of everything going on, and we're students of the business, we're researchers, we spot trends on ideas. And these are ideas that are going to help financial professionals grow, or we find it's an idea that's really relevant to their practice in a very positive way. And then we build ideas and we build programs around those. And what that really does is it educates and equips the financial professional community with more ideas to help drive more growth. But it also helps us, gain more access, or help our sales professionals, our wholesalers, gain more access to financial professionals, because we do have so many great ideas that help financial professionals, not from a product standpoint, but more from a practice management standpoint. And if we can get our sales professional in the door, or get our wholesalers, our sales professionals at Global Atlantic in the door to these financial professionals, it gives them the opportunity to share more ideas and then also introduce them to the products that we have in the industry, which are mostly insurance-based products, retirement-based products. And so that's our goal every day, is to find ideas, get our sales professional in the door so we can spread the wealth in the financial professional community.
So Jeannie, I know a couple of times a year you are speaking at the Forbes Shook Top Advisor Summit in Las Vegas. I wanted specifically to touch on this next one coming up in May that is focused on top women advisors. It's obviously, it's a topic that's important. And as as more and more of the wealth over the next 10 years really gets into the hands of women, and we need more women advisors out there, can you talk to me a little bit about, what excites you about that event, and maybe share a little bit, give us a little sneak peek behind the curtains on what you're going to touch on while you're there?
Yeah, it's one of the events I think annually that I look forward to the most. The top producer conference in the fall, and then Forbes Shook Top Women's Conference in May. And it's about 500 to 600 of the biggest, the best women financial professionals in our industry that gather for a 2 to 3 day conference and hear from their peers, hear from industry experts, and it's a big sharing community. It's so awesome. People walk away with so many great ideas, and these are highly successful women that have had to work really hard to be in these positions. And what I love going to the women's conference specifically is that everyone is so open to sharing, and that's why I like going, because I love sharing our content as well, and I always have the opportunity to get on the main stage and share a topic. And this year is a topic on one of our more, I would say, one of our more requested programs, and it's called Why She Chooses You. And it's about the women investor community, and why and what would make them want to work with a financial professional, what it takes, what's the formula, what's the code to crack with women investors. And so it's a program all about that. So I'll have about 20 minutes on the main stage to get through this. And, there's a lot of women and investing programs out there. We didn't want to take the path of sharing, why women need help, or, women are a disadvantage to men. We wanted it to be a lot more positive. Like, look, women, as you mentioned, over the next decade or so are going to control 2/3 of the wealth in this country. That's massive. And there is a formula, and it's not like a complicated formula. It's very common sense, but a lot of financial professionals haven't necessarily cracked it. And so what we do is we get on stage and provide the information on, the what, the why, and the how. Why is this such an important topic? What's the most important, I guess, information to know about the topic? And then how do you go after it? Let me take a step back and give you some of that why and that what. Right now in this country, the average age of a female widow is 59.4 years. So 59.4 years. So think about that. 59.4 years is when assets are nearing an all-time high. Now I'm going to share a stat with you. It's a very well-known stat, but I don't think it can be shared enough because it's so important and it's so critical, is that we know that women widows, within the first 12 months of a male spouse passing away, 70% of those female widows will leave the existing financial professional. And it was crazy. It is, but it's very eye-opening, because think about this. This is the baby boomer generation, right? And so what we know about the baby boomer generation is that women have typically taken on this role in the household as like the day-to-day finances, like the day-to-day managing the money for the day-to-day expenses. And then the male counterpart of that relationship typically takes care of the long-term aspects of their money, the long-term planning. And so what we found is that with the relationship with a financial professional, the male counterpart typically managed that, and the female didn't necessarily get involved. And so if that male spouse were to pass away, the female counterpart is saying, well, I never had the relationship with that person. They weren't my advisor. They were my husband's advisor. So now it's time for me to find my own financial advisor. And that's typically when they leave, within that first 12 months. In fact, I'll share a story here. We heard from one advisor that one of his high net worth clients, I believe they had about $10 million in assets on his book. One of that client, the male counterpart of that relationship, passed away suddenly. And the spouse actually called the advisor to be a pallbearer in the funeral. And so the pallbearer is like, this is like a really important relationship. And within a couple of months, she pulled the account. She pulled the account and just said, hey, I really appreciate everything that you did for us. But, it's now time. I'm moving on. I'm finding my own line, my own, I guess, book of professional relationships that I need. And I appreciate it, but I'm moving on. So that's a perfect example of having a little bit of a blind spot to that. And it's up to us in the financial professional community, up to people like myself in the practice management world to educate financial professionals. We don't want that happening to them. Like retention is a big part of the formula for organic growth. But if you can't keep your clients, you can't keep those assets, you can't grow. And so it's not hard, but it's all about awareness.
It's interesting. When you're talking to advisors, do you give them advice? Might be the wrong term, but are you helping coach them on how to better engage in both sides of a couple rather than focusing on one or the other? How do they actively engage both spouses to make sure that that doesn't happen as money passes through generations?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not difficult. It's very common sense. It's very, very practical. So, I mean, it's about this. Like, if you're still working with that baby boomer couple and it's, the male part of that relationship is the one that's still coming to the office for meetings and maybe she's not attending, we always say this is that you want to make 2 copies of everything. You want to have 2 folders. If you're still, handing out paper copies of things, that you want to have a folder for him. Like, okay, now I want you to go home and give this to Marcy, and then have a little note in there and say, hey, Marcy, we missed you on this meeting. Just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what we covered. Hope to see you next time. So it's more personalized to her, which is really, really important. When we look at the studies on women and what they say they experience when they go to a financial professional's office, they're like, it's sometimes I feel like I'm not even there. Like they don't even make eye contact with me. They don't ask me questions. They direct everything at him. So what's the point of going? And so what we tell financial professionals, it's like, think about this, ladies first on everything. So make eye contact with her first, spend some, eye visits on her. And then when you're asking questions, it should be to both of them, but lead to her first, ask for her answer first. Say, hey, Marcy, let's talk about this. Tell me how you feel about this. And then move over to him. And then you get both perspectives, which are really important. Now, another thing that we heard from the baby boomer women clients, they said, look, I don't need to go to these meetings. I feel like it's overwhelming. I don't make the decisions anyway, so it doesn't matter if I'm there. And what we tell the financial professional community, if they are getting that sort of response, because you should be encouraging, every advisor should be encouraging both to come to the meeting. But if they are getting a little bit of that pushback, like, no, that's him, then what you say to that is, look, I do need you to come in. We're a highly regulated industry, and I do need you to know what's going on. But here's the deal. I'm going to take pressure off of you. If you have decided in your relationship that you don't make those type of decisions, we don't want you to make those type of decisions. But what we do want to make sure that you know is that every decision that we make in a meeting, we do need you to know how that's going to affect you, how that's going to affect you in the future, how that's going to affect you if something suddenly happens. And so then all of a sudden you're taking kind of that pressure off of her. You're not upsetting that equilibrium, right? That balance. You're just saying, look, I just need you to know why we're making these decisions and how it's going to affect you. And when we've heard that advisors try that out, they're like, oh my gosh, it's like all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll come in, no problem. So, just to kind of give you a flavor of what's going on there. And it's, as simple as this. When I talk to financial professionals, I have some of them come up that say, you know what, I don't feel like maybe I do have as strong of a relationship with the female counterpart of that relationship. But now I'm trying to figure out if I do or if I don't. And so I have this very simple T-chart exercise that I tell financial professionals to do. I said, let's start small. Start with your top 5 to 10 client couples. All right. And on the left-hand side, you write her name. On the right-hand side, you write his name. And then just ask a series of questions. Where are they from? Where did they grow up? Where did they go to school? What are their top money goals? I think we have 5 questions. And then answer them individually for each person in that relationship. And then I say this, if you have any holes in those T-charts, then you have work to do.
Mm-hmm.
You have work to do to build that relationship, but start there.
Oh, that's a great idea. That's great.
You're right. I mean, it sounds like it's so simple of a thing to do. It's just, kind of switching your mindset a little bit. I mean, it sounds like this is a great way for advisors just to make sure that they're capturing more of the assets that are available out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I say it's little things like I just mentioned. It's little things that have the biggest impact. And if you can do those little things, yes, you will start to generate more revenue. Because I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of revenue that has been left on the table over the years by not working with women and doing these little things. And I'll share with you a study from Oliver Wyman. They came up with this a couple years ago that showed that our industry today is leaving 700 billion. I'm going to say that again. That's with a B. $700 billion of revenue. We're leaving that on the table by not working with women the same way that we work with men in our industry. So it's little things that will help take that money off the table and put it in your pocket if you do all these little things correctly.
Oh, that's an amazing stat. It really is. So, Jeannie, you've shared with us a little bit about how advisors can more effectively engage with women clients in their existing relationships. I'm curious, as the influence of women investors continues to grow, what are your opinions on how financial professionals should, or what should they understand about this shift today and what it's going to look like again in the future as more and more of that wealth transfers to females over the next 10 years?
Yeah, well, I think it starts like in your existing book, right? I mean, so like I think that the top is like, let's start with what you have and let's look at your couples. So like what I referenced before is kind of auditing your book and doing that T-charts exercise and getting really good at understanding and knowing the female counterpart of those relationships. So start there. Like if you don't start there, I'm not sure you'll be successful anywhere else. That's kind of like the table stakes, and let's get really good there. And then once you have that, once you do that, see, the thing is once you connect with your female clients, one of the biggest things that we talk about in our industry is you ask the financial professional community, how do you think you can grow, in this business? Like what's one way that you can grow in this business? And a lot of times people will say, not a lot, most of the time they say, well, you got to get referrals.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get referrals. But then financial professionals really struggle with asking for that, right? It's the go for it. All right, I'm going to go for it. It always seems awkward and uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it. And sometimes, they're successful. Sometimes they're not. Maybe they don't have the right script. Maybe they don't have the right communication strategy for that. But I'm going to tell you to reverse. If you look at female investors, female clients, they're the easiest ones to get referrals from, because if you do have a connection with them and you do have a strong relationship with them, you don't ever have to ask for referrals. They naturally become your advocate and your biggest advocate. When the women of the world, we are like the helpers, the little helpers of the world. And if we connect with a resource that has taken care of us, we want everyone we know to know about it. And I'll give you an example of this. My husband owns a construction company, and he was doing a big remodel project. It was like a master bath suite, a kitchen, and this and that. It was several months of a project. And when it was completed, it was amazing. It was beautiful. And Marcus, my husband, he never asked for referrals. He doesn't need to necessarily. But what that particular client did is she went out and she put that information without Marcus knowing. She didn't even tag him on Facebook, onto their like neighborhood Facebook page, and said, if anyone ever needs a kitchen or remodel or a contractor for any of your home projects, I highly recommend, my husband and his company and so on and so forth. He didn't know that. But after he completed that project, what he noticed is he kept getting calls in the same neighborhood by other women.
Crazy.
And he said it to me. He goes, Because it's so crazy. He's like, I've been getting all these calls from this neighborhood, this amazing neighborhood, and I have no idea what's driving it. And I was like, I don't know, just go with it, keep it going. And then he went to this one woman's house, and she was walking him out, like they were still talking, and he was walking out to his work van, and she goes, "Can I ask you, have you been getting a lot of calls lately from the neighborhood?" And he said, I literally was just telling my wife this, that yes. And she's like, well, I don't know if you know this, but Emily posted all those pictures that you of her remodel and highly recommended you. So I was just curious if you were getting a lot of calls. And he was like, I have been, and that must be why. So do you see how he never asked Emily, like, hey, pass along my information? And that's just one example that happens with women, is that if you can connect with her and you can engage with her, and now she considers you a part of her tribe, right? Her resource tribe, you'll never have to ask for referrals. She will just naturally advocate for you in the field that you're in. And so that's one thing. And now I've gone on so long for that, talking about this, I don't remember the exact question, but I just wanted to put that out there.
That's actually, yeah, you did answer it. And I'm glad you went that direction, because, referrals do drive this business, and advisors are cliently looking for ways to engage with new clients. And to your point, if they can treat their women clients in a way that really makes them feel, well taken care of, to have that referral source without having to ask for it or having to go and look for new clients is, that's that's the goal of every advisor. So that was great.
It's, it's one thing too, just like the little things that, like, once you're in this phase of like connecting and engaging with these, one way in the financial professional world is, women love to be educated, and not educated in a condescending way, but like truly educated. Like if you can educate us on a concept or just financial literacy in general, and you do it in a welcoming way that doesn't come across, again, like condescending, that will connect. Yes. That will connect with her. I know over the years we did some studies. A lot of advisors ask, like, I want to do more women. I want to do more women seminars. I want to do this. And what we did years ago is we studied that terminology, like women seminars, women client seminars. And if you were to position your seminar as a women's seminar or just a generic workshop where there was going to be some education attached to that workshop, they would overwhelmingly go to the workshop, the just plain workshop. And here's what they said. They said, well, okay, a client seminar, I get it, or a women's seminar, I get it, but why is it just a women's seminar? Why can't I go to the man's seminar? Are you discounting the information? Are you dumbing it down? Because if that's the case, I don't want to go to it, but I will go to a workshop to learn. And so there's like kind of there's specific language too that for women that work really, really well. And that's one of them. Another thing that we found with catering to women or women workshops or this and that, a lot of times people will suffer from this, like this thing where they think, oh, it's women, so we've got to, paint everything pink and make it real frilly and make it this, oh, they say for women, what they do is everyone shrinks it and pinks it. You don't have to shrink it and pink it for women. Awesome. Just to have like a nice modern approach to what you're doing. Another thing when people get into like, okay, so let's just say people that are listening to this podcast and they're intrigued and they're saying, well, I got to go after women. A lot of times we hear this, like when I coach advisors, they'll say, I'll say, well, what's your goal for growth this year? What are you going to do? What are you going after? And they'll say, well, I think this year I'm going to focus on the women's market. And I'll kind of just chuckle a little bit and I'll be like, well, of course you are, because you must have just nailed down the man's market, right? You got that locked in, that man's market. So now you got to go after the women's market. And then I had to correct him, like, there's no such thing as a women's market. We're all unique in our own needs. There's no women's market. We're individuals, and so we don't want to make those mistakes either.
Right. That's interesting. It's the psychology behind it is so interesting, because what I hear you saying, and it makes complete sense, is you have to have a targeted approach. But if it's too targeted, or you try to put people in our conversation, women in a box, you're failing. Right? You're not getting
Yeah.
where you want to get by being so targeted.
Let me make a comment too about going back to kind of this language and positioning. I've been studying language principles for almost 2 decades now. And one thing that I do know is that when you're putting together kind of a communication strategy, or just in general, anytime you have to communicate with any clients, but specifically women, there really are 3 communication principles that we want to follow. The first one is that we want to stay positive in the conversation, that scare tactics do not work. Anytime you try to scare anyone, especially women, into something, it turns them off. You're not going to connect with them. So stay positive. So even in, like, let's just say this is timely, right? In this market right now, we're seeing a lot of volatility, and you'll see a lot of advisors that might go and be like, hey, look, I'm going to call my clients, and they're not intending to scare them, but like, hey, the world is falling and we need to figure this out. You need to come in right away. And people don't necessarily respond to that fear tactic. We got to stay positive. We got to find a couple positive things to say in a conversation. Another thing in that is that if you're competing for business from a woman investor, client, or a prospect, is you never want to bash. You never want to bash the competition, because that's a real turnoff for women. So it's like, if you're going after it and you're trying to position yourself as the better professional for their money, or whatever it is that you're going after, don't ever bash the competition. You'll immediately they'll turn away from that. Another communication principle that works is you got to keep your message plausible, believable, credible. Don't ever make anything too good to be true, because then they become skeptics.
Sure.
And then the last principle is you just got to keep the messaging simple, not in a condescending way, but just simple. Don't overuse the jargon. They're not turned on by that. In fact, they're turned off by that. They don't like, and not just women in general, but investors in general, or clients, they don't like the acronyms that we use. They want full words. And so if I could leave anything, like if you're just kind of thinking about your communication strategy, specifically for women, always keep the message positive, plausible, and simple.
I like it. Jeannie, you've given us some really fantastic takes on how advisors can really elevate their practice. Is there one more gold nugget in there that we can ask you about, that as far as an advice that you could offer to our advisors?
Yeah, I think so, a lot, but I'm going to focus on just a couple here. First of all, okay, so everything that I just shared with you about women investors, that, the wealth, transfer, 2/3 of the wealth are going to be controlled by women over the next couple of decades. Don't lose sight of that. Don't put that aside today. Make sure that is, front and center of every business planning opportunity that you have. Build that into every business plan, because that is the key for your success moving forward. Another aspect of this is, we kind of already talked about this, is kind of segmenting and making sure that auditing your existing relationships. But I would say this is, it's so simple and it's nothing new, but don't lose touch with segmentation and what that means for your book. Like, the existing clients that you have in your book, but the existing assets, where are they today? Who has those assets, and where are they going to go and be in the future? And that's the key. I always like to follow the money. Where is the money going? Where is the money flowing to? And, if you look back to like the early 1800s, the gold rush that happened in this country, everyone heard about, all this gold that people were finding out west. And you saw this massive amount of people migrating from east to west to go after this gold rush. And, some people were successful, more people were not successful, but there were certain people that were very successful through this whole journey. And it was the people that stopped along the way to observe. And what they observed, what they saw, what they were seeing, things that other people didn't see, that no matter if you were successful in finding the gold or not, you were going to need certain clothes to wear to make sure that you could manage that whole job of finding gold, the tools that you would need to dig the gold or find the gold, that was going to be critical, and a number of other things. And those people, what they were able to do is they were able to spot trends, right? They were able to spot and see things that other people didn't see. And that's what I would suggest to all of the financial professional community is always be aware, try to see what other people can't see. And one of the things right now, there's a massive gold rush happening in our business right now with the next gen wealth transfer, with the baby boomers leaving the money behind. It'll first go to the spouse. So we talked about that. We covered that. And the next place it's going to go is actually Gen X. And you don't hear a lot about Gen X, but they're an interesting, unique group, and there is a code to crack with them as well. But here's the deal. Over the next 2 decades, Gen X, with their own wealth accumulation and the wealth transfer that's going to go to them, they are set up right now to be the wealthiest generation over the next 2 decades. And it's not going to happen. It's already happening. And so that would be my suggestion, is that's one area to think about, segmentation and not losing sight of and not missing out on what potentially could be seen here. And it's Gen X is the next big opportunity. So that's what I share. Maybe we come back and maybe we talk a little bit about that, but that's going to be a massive one. $89 trillion in assets passing to Gen X over the next 2 decades.
Well, we definitely got to get you back. That's for sure. So
100%. And we talk a lot about that wealth transfer. So we will definitely have you back to touch on that. Well, Jeannie, this has been absolutely wonderful. And as we wrap it up here, we're going to ask you kind of a fun question that we like to ask the guests that join us. And not to put you on the spot here, but if your role and what you do and your team do every day was a movie, what movie would that be?
Well, you are putting me on the spot because while I love movies, I'm not really, oh man, this is a tough one. A movie. Okay. How about this? All right. How about this one's going to be a little bit out there, but I'm going to bring it back home for everyone. Okay. So I'm thinking maybe Pretty Woman, a Pretty Woman, and not that I'm Julia Roberts in the movie at all, but you kind of go back into the plot, and you have this like uber successful business person that's made a ton of money over time and is really good at his job, but maybe a little clueless about other things, other aspects of their life, or maybe even in their business. And then you got, Julie Roberts, comes into play here and helps him with things that he's not necessarily comfortable with, but at the end of the day has, big impact for him. And, I kind of think about this. We work with uber successful individuals in our industry, and I don't want to call them clueless, but sometimes they're so focused at the task at hand that they might miss some of these things on the peripheral, right? That like someone like a team like ours, we find for them and then insert them for them or provide those ideas that make an impact on them as well. So I would say maybe Pretty Woman is a nice movie to represent what we do.
I love that. That was great on the spot. I mean, they're like Edward. He was great at taking over businesses M&A, but if you asked him to drive a Lotus, he was not very good at that. So no, that was perfect. So thank you.
Good point.
Jeannie, thank you so much. This has been awesome. We really appreciate you. Thank you for your time and your insights. We got to get you back on, soon. Also for everyone out there, I'm Eric Alvarado, and this is my co-host, Mr. Ted Hikes. And this has been your friendly conversation about insurance and wealth advising come together. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all next time. And make sure you get in on the gold rush. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Absolutely.